2024 has seen Hollywood really step up their game in the animated industry with banger after banger like Transformers 1, Inside Out 2 and The Wild Robot, which has some of the highest ratings pretty much ever. And Japan countered with
Don't you want me like I want you, baby? Leave tomorrow, but tonight go crazy. All you gotta do is just meet me at the...
Who knew that one of the most ridiculous and over-the-top shows to come out of Japan would somehow tip the scales back with its absolutely stunning art, a romance that's done better than just about any anime you've watched, and somehow doing all of this whilst dealing with complex adult topics that made people go from this
He's making balls!
Go for it, Otaku!
Oh my... No! Oh my...
to this.
It's beautiful that she did that.
Freaking beautiful.
Wow.
And that's without mentioning the fact that the primary plot revolves around finding this kid's balls. So let's break down why Dandadan hasn't just saved anime, but it might have saved you too. And for that, we have to go back to 2007. Now, I know what you're thinking, but just shut up and listen because this will be important later on, because we're in the same year the first iPhone was released, the year Spider-Man 3, Transformers, and came out, and the year the Harry Potter books concluded. But for Yokinobu Tatsu, it was the year he needed to get off his ass and make some damn bread. So he became a mangaka. Now you might be asking, if you need to make money, surely there's better ways to go about it than making manga. And you'd be absolutely right, because it couldn't have gone more wrong. This man was on the grind for 19 hours a day for a whole 8 years. And the only thing he had to show for it were 2 failed mangas. But I promise this will all click for you later on, because this will be important when he soon meets a guy called Lin, who basically tells him,
You know what your problem is, Tatsu?
No.
You just don't get romance.
Okay.
So here's what you're going to do about it.
All right, just interrupt me.
You're going to
Finally go outside and talk to people so I can develop meaningful relationships?
fuck. No. You're going to read 100 romance mangas.
And then he had 2 more mangas cancelled and a bunch more that weren't even published. But he didn't give up, and he soon meets someone that would change his life forever. Tatsu went on to work alongside none other than the creator of Chainsaw Man, Fujimoto himself. But not just him. This man was in the same room as Tatsuya Endo, who made Spy Family, and Yuji Kaku, who would eventually make Hell's Paradise. And guess what? This bum still failed. Do you know how hard that is? That's like playing for Real Madrid and never winning the Champions League. I mean, that shit just doesn't happen. So what's going wrong here? Alcohol. No, not too much alcohol, but rather not enough. Because let's be honest, you have to be pissed off your head to think about creating a manga about a kid losing his ball. And it worked. This shit took over everything. And I mean everything.
Dandadan is fucking phenomenal.
Dandadan.
Dandadan.
Dandadan?
Dandadan.
With over 450 million views and people talking about it as if it was the next greatest idea since the man that decided to cook bread for a second time to create toast. But what the hell is it about this anime that makes it so amazing? Because the plot really shouldn't work. How was it able to bring the anime industry back on track and able to compete with Hollywood heavy hitters? Well, that's all because of its absolutely amazing art, really ridiculous romance, and balls to the walls preposterous plots. So why don't we start there, where we can talk about the first half of the season, then an episode that's so good it literally sits at 9.7 on IMDb and had grown adults reacting like this. And finally, the last half of the season. And what better way to start a series than a girl hitting her boyfriend with one of the cleanest kicks I've seen since Shido scored in the under-20s match. And 2 seconds later, she's on the floor as her boyfriend breaks up with her. And now I know what you're thinking, isn't this domestic violence or something? Well, yeah, but get this. The reason they fight is because this broke buzzcut dickhead tells his girl that he'll only take her on a date if she pays for it. Unless, get this, she puts out. And get this again, she has to pay for the hotel. So I'd say he deserves losing his head. We then meet her friends, who are the real goats for the story, and I'll explain why later, but she's all mopey and ends up wandering the halls like when your balls get stuck to your thigh and you gotta do that super long step, and ends up spotting this weirdo, who's less like an actual person and more like that basket from that old iPhone game. But anyway, she stops the kids from bullying him because she's actually a pretty good person, and the nerd naturally thinks she's in love with him and ends up telling her way too much about his weird interest in aliens until she violates this poor boy's entire life. Now keep in mind, we're only 5 minutes into the show, but we've already learned so much about the characters without even having to be told, because Momo immediately realizes that she went too far and, get this, actually apologizes. When the hell do you ever see that in Shounen? And that's part of what makes these characters so good, because they're both flawed, but not too flawed. And after Momo learns where this kid's boundaries are, she never once crosses them, but she does laugh like hell when he eventually loses his balls, which we're about to get to, because she sends him to a place where nobody in the world could ever convince me to go, especially alone. And that's when we're introduced to the villain of the show. Now, we've seen a lot of great villains in Shounen. In My Hero Academia, we have Shigaraki. In Hunter x Hunter, we have Meruem. And of course, what is, in my opinion, the greatest villain in anime, a teenage volleyball player. But in Dandadan, we have Turbo Granny. And Ken does just about what anyone would in this situation, where he taps his feet together and says, for getting out there faster than Mr. Beast's reputation crashed. But he's not the only one having a hard time, because Momo has been abducted by aliens that can only reproduce by doing something to her that I can't mention, but it involves putting the Goonstick 5000 in places I also can't mention. Luckily for her, Ken comes to the rescue possessed by Turbo Granny. And there's actually a really important reason for why this happens, but I'll explain that later, because while he's trying his best to protect the only person that ever treated him like a person, Momo remembers what her grandma taught her and unlocks her psychic powers, and the two finally break free. But things are far from over, because Ken finally opens up to Momo, and she actually starts to understand him, which leads to him flipping out just like you'd see in any other anime. Except it isn't like that at all. Yes, the characters are annoying, but not in a Zenitsu way. Ken is a self-loathing loner who is contrasted by Momo and her confident personality. They complete each other in a way that's similar to a certain anime movie that I won't mention because I'll end up crying like a little pussy. But the point is, Ken is surprisingly realistic. He'll occasionally open up, but when he's met with understanding instead of criticism, he immediately shuts down again. And this is a repeated theme in the show, and it honestly makes him the perfect character for the story Dandadan is trying to tell. But what is that story? Because it has taken the anime world by storm, and for good reason. And it has done so many things right that we just wouldn't see with Western animation or television in general, culminating in a certain episode with a 9.7 rating. 9.7. That is insane. So let's keep going and find out what it is about this story about a kid losing his dick that's so amazing. But before we do that, if you want to see more Dandadan content, be sure to subscribe. I'm trying my best to hit 20k subs. But for now, let's focus on the fact that Ken is still possessed by Turbo Granny, so he couldn't actually enter Momo's home without them removing this sticker which her grandma had to put up to keep the ghosts at bay. And you guessed it, the ghosts are no longer at bay. Except it's not a ghost, it's actually an alien sent by other aliens because they seem to have an unhealthy obsession with high schoolers. And this is where Ken unlocks his powers and becomes Chigiri. The two then work together with Momo using her psychokinetic powers, and Ken just, well, he runs really fast, and somehow they defeat the alien. And the animation and art in this scene, much like the rest of the anime, is just something else. It's not like the flashy colors and fluid movement that you'd be used to with Ufotable.
Oh my god, look at how hyper-realistic that explosion.
Shut up, we get it. But Dandadan's art is just so damn unique, with this scene being pretty much all black and white, with the exception of the red on Ken, which is a color we see Turbo Granny portrayed as in the intro to the show. Now, I understand art is subjective, so I won't approach this from an oh my god, Dandadan's art is so amazing point of view, but Dandadan's art is so amazing. We're seeing more and more animation move towards focusing on realistic beauty. I mean, look at how utterly gorgeous the environment looks in How to Train Your Dragon, and compare that to something more stylistic like The Wild Robot. It isn't the case of one being better than the other, but more so the importance of needing both in modern media. And that's what Dandadan gets so right. The use of color is brilliant, and some scenes have the characters' auras literally bleeding into not just the environment, but the entire shot. Like they're literally changing our television screens. And let's be honest, most of you are probably watching this on your phones, but you get the point. And despite these hyper-exaggerated movements, simplistic character designs, and over-the-top animation, the environment is understated and tangible because they do an amazing job of dirtying the frame, like in movies such as The Batman or the first 3 Transformers films. And directors like Kimi no Nawa's Makoto Shinkai or Silent Voice's Naoko Yamada are experts at this, and it plays a big part in what makes episode 7 so amazing. amazing. But then again, there are a lot of things that make that one of the greatest anime episodes ever. So let's get back to the story and see if Ken can get his dick back. I never thought I'd have to say that sentence. After Ken and Momo defeat the ghost that's not actually a ghost but an alien, Momo passes out from exhaustion and Turbo Granny takes over Ken's body only for Momo's grandma to come in like prime Messer Erzil. And oh my god, there's only room for one MILF in my life, and that's Cynthia. So I'm going to have to look past this baddie and focus on the plot. This is going to be tough, so let's get through this quickly. Momo's grandma traps Turbo Granny in this spirit circle and squares up to her like peak Optimus Prime versus Megatron, and Turbo Granny's all like, lol, you can't trap me here, I'ma eat you, and Momo's grandma is all like, trap you.
No, I want to kill you.
And then we sharp cut to Momo waking up and thinking Ken is dead, which leads to, good lord. Anyway, it leads to this beautiful scene of Momo's memories with Ken, where she realizes, damn, I actually care about this nerd. And the next few episodes are filled with some of the best romance I've ever seen. Wait, don't click off. Now, I'm not exactly a fan of most romance anime, with the exception of Kimi no Na wa, Tenki no Ko, and that one movie I still refuse to name because to this day it makes me cry like a little bit. But the point is, Dandadan actually does romance right. Granted, that's not exactly hard considering most anime couples act in the most cliched way possible, but I'll do my best to explain what makes Momo and Ken's relationship so damn great. And it all starts with Momo watching Ken piss. Okay, I promise it will make sense later, but even I can't explain how this boy's pissing without a dick. But the more important point is that whilst he's pissing, the goat herself, Turbo Granny, comes out and tells Momo that unless she comes to that tunnel with Ken, anyone that Ken sees will pretty much die. And naturally, we see like 5 fit changes before this happens, and I'm not complaining because I'm so sick of seeing anime characters wearing the same damn thing. And if you're gonna face a powerful yokai and potentially die, you might as well be dripping whilst you do it. So now it's time for the epic face-off between Ken and Momo versus Turbo Granny. And these two are running for their lives as the entire fight has the screen painted red, which, like I mentioned before, is the same color that we see Turbo Granny portrayed as in the intro. But let's forget about that for now and focus on how Momo could finally be the one to beat Goku with her battle IQ. This girl is the Sheldon Cooper of fighting because she quite literally cooks Turbo Granny to the point she has to summon all these spirits to run a fade on them. But these two are just way too quick with it, and we get to see some super creative uses of their combined powers with some amazing music that culminates in a scene that has one of the best cuts in modern anime. Now this is all well and good, but why? It's gonna be sad to see my goat go, so the least we can do is talk about why Turbo Granny was doing what she was doing. And this lends itself to the more adult topics this show covers so well, and something we'll see again in episode 7, because it turns out that this is a place where young girls are violated, cut to pieces, and left to die. And Turbo Granny is often found near these places, leading Psycho to believe she was trying to console their restless souls. And that explains why she came to Momo's rescue when she was about to be violated by the aliens. And it's honestly quite a cathartic end to this arc. But the story is just getting started, and we've still got to cover the brilliance that is episode 7 and how Dandadan really pushes the anime industry forward as a whole thanks to how it approaches romance. But before any of that happens, the anime does something that so many other anime don't. It gives us a break. I think this is something a lot of movies in particular get wrong when they give us non-stop action, which ends with the action becoming stale. You see, moments of pause are necessary to let the viewers process what they just saw, and it's something Kimi no Na wa does really well. And this is actually one of my criticisms with Haikyuu's Battle of the Garbage Dump, which, due to the time constraints of being a movie rather than multiple episodes long, was forced to cram a lot of action into a short runtime. But Dandadan doesn't make that mistake, and I'd say this next episode I'm about to discuss is probably my favorite episode of the season, even more than episode 7, which people rightfully can't shut up about. And I don't know what it says about me that this was my favorite episode in a series packed with some incredibly hype moments, but let me try and explain why I love this episode so much before we get to that almighty episode 7. And it starts with Ken being Ken and being way too awkward to talk to Momo. And let's be honest, we've all been texting the most outrageous stuff to a buddy, and then you see them in person and you're like, hi? And things only get worse for Ken. And can I just say, he's a better man than I am, because if I got hit like this, I would be channeling my inner Oikawa nuts 2 seconds later. Luckily, Ken doesn't actually mind being treated like this, where we get one of the cutest lines in the show.
今ならどんな理不尽なことをされても全てを許すことができる。なぜなら自分には素晴らしい友達ができたからだ。
And Ken's not the only one smitten, as all Momo can do is think about getting to talk to him again, and we get this super frustrating sequence of the two trying to find each other that's completely over the top cliche, but it's just so damn wholesome in a way that makes you want to pull your hair out until they finally run into each other. And this is where Ken realizes that even though he got his goon stick back, he's still missing the batteries. So he does what any rational person would do in this situation and goes to the one person that can help him. Except she doesn't even want to talk to him. But that's okay, because this boy is a straight up pussy magnet and bumps into this girl, which makes Momo jealous until she hears her talking shit about her man and drops a damn metal bowl on her head. Now I don't know what the hell this thing was doing on top of the lockers or why you'd even need a bowl this big in a high school, but I'm more interested in the fact that this scene, this little wholesome image right here, was enough to cause a whole race war on Twitter that led to Ken's English VA eventually deactivating his account. And honestly, this show's fanbase might be even worse than MHA's, and I didn't see that coming. But I also didn't see this coming.
竿は戻ってたし、それで安心して弾までは気づけなくて。さーっておめえいいように言ってんじゃねえぞ。鉛筆だろおめえのは。
But wait, ignore all of that, because there's something far more important to happen than losing Ken's balls.
Arise.
That's right, the goat is back. Except she's now a cat that's lost her powers because Ken has them, and Grandma starts beating on Turbo Granny like my mum when I get a B in my exams, and these two start beating on her too. And I'll be honest, I felt so bad for this girl because I mean, just look at her, she's so damn cute. But then again, she lost Ken's balls, so I'd be pretty pressed too if I was him, but not as pressed as he gets when this guy pretty much calls Momo a slut, and Ken's dead ass ready to end his life right then and there. And we soon find out that the person spreading these rumors is none other than the super popular pink-haired girl from earlier. I mean, with hair like this, did you really think we'd only see her once? And it turns out that she can see all the shit Momo can do and thinks she's some kind of devil and considers herself to be the chosen one because she found one of Ken's magical golden balls. Yeah, this show's weird as hell, but I promise you're about to cry your eyes out in literally like 2 minutes. But before that, we're gonna see Ira and her friends attempt to run a fade on poor old Momo here, and we learn that after all the crazy shit we've seen her do in the last few episodes, the way you can nerf her is with zip ties. But it's clearly not enough because Momo picks up these two and are they dead?
We don't care.
But Ira isn't one to give up so easily as she starts rubbing Ken's balls on Momo's face. And yes, you heard that right. But if I were Ira, I'd be more concerned in trying to free Momo because we soon meet our next yokai. Turbo Granny soon shows up and has no idea who this auraless yokai is and ends up having to Google her when she really should be trying to free Momo, but she can't because, well, she's a cat with no thumbs, so fair enough. But that results in pretty much everyone being eaten like we're an Attack on Titan or something. Luckily, the goat herself is able to free them and even drops an emote just to let Acrobatic Silky know who the real yokai is on the block. And now, my children, it's finally time for episode 7. And this episode isn't just good. It isn't even just great. It's an entirely different kind of experience. Something that leaves you feeling hollow and breathless. It has a 9.7 on IMDb. 9.7. For those of you that failed maths, that's like 0.3 away from perfection. That puts it just below Perfect Game from Attack on Titan, or below Hero from Attack on Titan, or below From You 2,000 years ago from Attack. Damn, Attack on Titan has a lot of high-rated episodes, but none of them are like what we see here. You see, we've seen episode 7 become some kind of mythic milestone in other series. Attack on Titan's 7th episodes across the different seasons have introduced game-changing twists. In season 1, it's Eren's Titan form, and in season 2, it's the warrior reveal. In Demon Slayer, it's when Tanjiro begins his journey with Nezuko, and in Haikyuu, it's the introduction of one of the greatest antagonists in anime. And for Dandadan, episode 7 steps far beyond convention, disregarding everything the show has forced us to feel up until this point and giving us something so much more raw. The show leaves a lot up to interpretation, so I'll use the manga to give a little more context on what happens when we learn about Acrobatic Silky's backstory, about how she was a single mother, forced to work multiple jobs, including being a dancer for the Yakuza. It's clear she owes them money, and to her credit, she actually earns enough by working herself into the ground, all whilst taking care of her daughter. But it's here she makes a huge mistake. She ends up using a portion of the money to buy her daughter a dress, and it's because of this that she comes up short when it's time to repay, leading to her daughter being taken away from her. I don't think I need to tell you what would happen to a young girl in this situation, but the show truly makes us feel the mother's pain with an 8-minute long sequence without a single line of dialogue. dialogue, except the harsh reality of this is we only feel a fraction of her pain. After all, nothing can be quite as painful as a mother believing that her daughter was unlucky to have been born to someone like her. It's truly heartbreaking, and it ends with the woman performing one last dance off the top of her building, the streetlights twinkling below her like stars until she finally jumps and the screen fades to black.
お母さん、いつもありがとう。
The silence is suffocating, but that's the point. We're made to sit with it, to stew in the pain, much like the mother who had no escape from her life. There's no quick joke this time, no immediate levity to soften the blow. The series that usually sprinkles humor after every dark moment, that lets us catch our breath and compose ourselves, decides that now we have to sit with the pain. And it ends with Aira embracing acrobatic Selkie and thanking her for being there for her all those years ago as she gives up her life so Aira can live. And that brings us to the final 4 episodes, which really put their focus on the show's romance. And boy do they do it right in a way other romance anime and even Western media in general could only hope to. And those shonen that have some kind of romantic subplot should really take notes, because this is how romance should be written. But we'll get to the romance later, because right now Ken, Momo and Aira are fighting for their lives against the same aliens from the start of the show. It turns out that these Harvey Epstein looking ass weirdos want Ken's goon stick so they can have his powers, and after Aira awakens her powers, they figure they can take her and Momo's powers too. How? You guessed it, by committing an act that I can't say without getting demonetized. So picture this, you and your friends are out skinny dipping with the Loch Ness monster, you know, as you do. And yes, that's actually me. And suddenly you start getting chased by these weirdos when you were just trying to have a good time. And the next thing you know, you're butt ass naked in the middle of your school hallway on top of the baddie you pulled by being autistic. How did we get from one of the most emotional episodes of the anime to this? And why is this still so great? But do you know who else is great? These two. Do you know how rare it is for a girl in anime to have 2 female friends that are this supportive? They wholeheartedly want to see Ken and Momo together to the point that when we're introduced to our final main character Gigi, they stand up for Ken when he's not there. But even Gigi, to his credit, is pretty likable despite his quirks. And we soon see him, Momo and Ken get dragged out around town before ending up at a garbage dump where one mannequin is professing his love to another mannequin. Just go with it, I swear it makes sense. Okay, it doesn't, but just go with it anyway, because hearing this makes Ken realize that he in fact likes Momo, which only took 11 episodes, but at least we got there. Unfortunately, he can't act on this as the trio have to visit Gigi's home to exercise it or some shit, and the show ends on the biggest cliffhanger since Across the Spider-Verse. And that brings us to what I believe is the greatest aspect of this show, its romance. And that says a lot, because romance in anime can be tricky. Too often we see it reduced to blushing faces and stammered confessions, or worse, a subplot that's tacked on just for the sake of tension. But Dandadan offers something different. You see, I've always thought that romance anime was dumb. And before you say it, no, it has nothing to do with the lack of romance in my life, thank you very much. But during a certain pandemic a few years ago, my friends and I watched Kimi no Na wa together over Discord, and I had a moment similar to how Ken felt at the garbage dump. I don't think I need to tell you how amazing Your Name is, where 2 people fall in love without ever having met each other. They only ever really communicate by reading the notes the other left for them the day prior. It's so sweet. And that's what Dandadan gets so right about romance. In the scene where Momo opens up about her grandmother, Ken doesn't chime in to offer any advice. He doesn't even say a single word. Instead, he listens. He listens because while he may not understand that connection isn't about who speaks the most, but about who's genuinely hearing the other person, the show knows that. It's telling us the story about 2 kids, but it doesn't treat its audience like kids. By simply being present and attentive, Ken helps Momo feel understood, cared for and seen. It's subtle, but it's exactly why she's drawn to him, even if she'll never outright admit it. And it's not like we haven't seen romance in shonen before, but it's always lacked something in comparison to Western media. At least it has for me. Whether it's through the quietly earned respect of Hiccup and Astrid in How to Train Your Dragon, the stubborn hope and bittersweet near misses between Ted and Robin in How I Met Your Mother, the careful trust and unwavering partnership of Elend and Vin in Mistborn, or even the wordless yet undeniable devotion of Wally and Eve's mechanical hearts. These pieces of media just get romance in a way that anime seems to miss, resulting in it becoming cliche and tropey. But Dandadan is different. Ken doesn't search for aliens just because it's a quirky hobby. It's a stand-in for the isolation he's felt his entire life. And now that Momo's in the picture, he channels that energy into protecting her and proving himself worthy of her trust. Their connection doesn't just grow because the plot demands it. It grows because each action, every joke, and every serious moment reveals the quiet ways that they complete each other. And while the two of them aren't separated by cosmic forces stretching time and space like in Kimi no Nawa, it still feels like they're bonded by that same string. And that's why I truly believe that Dandadan, along with many other anime, have saved the industry. We have the love that unites Taki and Mitsuha across time in Your Name, the gentle bond formed as Sunio and Kumiko learn to dream side by side in Jose, and of course, the most meaningful one of all being the way a certain two characters complete each other in an anime that I still can't even name without falling to tears. That's what makes anime so special. That's what makes Dandadan so special. Ken and Momo share this kind of sincere authenticity that makes them feel so much more real. The show doesn't rely on dramatic confessions or grand gestures. Instead, it focuses on the little things, like Ken wanting to be stronger, not just to be able to protect Momo, but to be able to fight by her and help her. It embraces the power of sincerity and listening. It shows that sometimes feeling heard can mean more than any passionate speech. It reminds us that love is something built over time, through silence, through laughter, and through the quiet promise that you're never truly alone when someone chooses to truly hear you. And that's why I think Dandadan hasn't just saved anime, but it might have saved you too. Because each of these stories capture a different strain of affection, steady, aching, fervent, or tender. And even if you're not searching for love in your own life, you can't help but carry these moments with you. Scattered sparks that remind you what love might feel like if you ever stumble into it. But with that being said, as amazing as Dandadan is, it's very much possible for an anime to not have a lot of these things going for it and still be incredibly entertaining. So if you want to learn more about that, click on the video on the left. Thanks for watching.